Hi YouTube, my name is Jack, and today we're going to talk about tarot. This is probably going to be a fairly short video. I don't have a ton to say, but it's been a while since I've sat in front of a camera, so here we go. Um, Today I've been thinking about sort of a skill in tarot that it took me years and years and years to get comfortable with. And one that honestly, like once I started doing it, I became a vastly better and more comfortable reader. And that's being literal with tarot. So, as a little bit of background for anyone who's stumbling across this video and encountering me for the first time, or anyone who has been following me for a while but sort of doesn't know my whole long story, I started reading tarot when I was like 11 years old, and throughout my childhood and my adolescence, I was raised in a pretty staunchly atheistic, non-woo-woo home. And so, I have since changed, and that's not really the person I am anymore, nor the way I see the world. But when I was growing up and when I was first learning how to use tarot, I came at it from this very, strongly materialistic, sort of reductionist point of view, where for me, tarot was merely an interpretive tool with which to reflect on my own situation from sort of an outsider's perspective. And I think that is still a really good and legitimate way to read tarot, right? I think it's important to make room in tarot for people who don't believe in magic, who don't believe in spirits, who don't believe that you can foretell the future, and who really just want to use it as a reflective and a contemplative tool. Um, Tarot is really good for that, and I think we shouldn't downplay uh, the uses that tarot has in these more sort of reductive and non supernatural, for lack of a better word, um, ways of approaching the cards. So my standard spiel that I would always give was, every card in the tarot deck has a particular theme or set of themes that's associated with it. When you lay out the cards, you piece together those themes to form a narrative, right? You tell a story based on the cards that you've laid out, and then you find a way to interpret that story relative to your own situation. And in so doing, you provide yourself with fresh insight on the situation that you might not have otherwise had. So the idea that I had, the way I approached tarot back then, was very much about this idea of like you create a narrative and then you fill in the blanks with your own specific situation. And just the interpretive hermeneutic process of doing that, of projecting your life onto this story that's been told at random, allows you to reflect on your situation, to think about your situation in new ways, and to gain some insight, right? And I really didn't see it as a supernatural process. I saw it as something very sort of psychological and personal and reflective. But that was, how I approached the cards. And truth be told, that's not that different from how I read the cards today. My reading of the cards today is a little more sort of, I embrace the hoobity hoobity, right? I do believe in predictive readings. I do believe that you can look into the future. I do believe that you can gain access to sort of verifiable information about the world that you wouldn't otherwise have had. And in that respect, my approach to tarot reading now is very different than what it was back then. But the basic idea of you have the cards, they have their themes associated with them, and you lay them out into a narrative framework, and then you tell a story and you fill it in with your own information. Still very much the way that I approach reading tarot. Um, but because I had this sort of big abstract view of tarot, this very general process, um, one of the things that for easily the first probably the first decade that I read tarot, um, that I was terrified to do was to be too literal about reading the cards, right? I wanted to be very sort of bird's eye view, abstract, big picture, talking about general themes and symbolism and these very big sort of empty archetypal sorts of things, because that makes it easier to project your situation into them, right? It gives you an empty framework that you can then fill in. And um, the transition that happened that I think significantly improved my tarot reading was when I started to open myself up and allow for some of those more, low-level literal readings of the cards. Um, so just as an example, I have my Golden Universal Tarot here. This is the deck that I reach for these days if I'm looking for Rider-Waite symbolism. And if you're asking about a situation and you pull like the Ace of Cups in reverse, this could have to do with negative emotions or emotional blockages or sort of anything along those lines, right? That would be the very sort of thematic bird's eye point of view way of approaching it. But if you're asking, like, if someone's asking about their home life, their home situation, this could also be a burst water pipe. It could, and I've had readings where something like that came up, right? Um, if you draw the Six of Pentacles could be talking about general themes of sort of generosity and reciprocity and charity. It can also mean somebody's going to give you money. And like the right Six of Cups. This is my last general example, and then I'll start talking some theory. But the Six of Cups can be, you know, broad discussions of childhood or memory or nostalgia or your relationship with the past. It could also mean there is a child who is present in your situation whose actions are meaningful and impactful and will have consequences for you, right? Like, um, and right, those are much more sort of concrete, down to earth, and literal interpretations of the cards. And I don't think tarot always needs to be that way. I think sometimes tarot doesn't work that way, right? If you ask like what's going on in my love life and you draw, I don't know, the 7 of or the 10 of swords, right? Like probably the answer is not that someone is going to stab you in the back a bunch of times with a sword. It's probably right a situation in which literalism doesn't help us understand the cards. But I think for the first several years of my tenure as a tarot reader, I really clung to a very abstract approach to tarot, and I was really, really terrified to get concrete and specific, and to allow myself to read just sort of straight literal interpretations of the cards because I wanted it to be this highfalutin reflective process. Um, and I think that my reading suffered because of that. And I think that even if you approach tarot as a highfalutin reflective process, right, even if you don't use tarot for divination and you really do just use it as a tool for meditation or contemplation or that sort of thing, um, it's okay for symbolism to be a little bit literal sometimes, right? That is how symbolism works. Um, Sometimes the most obvious interpretation for something is the best one. And if you draw, here I'll shuffle through here and find a court card. If you draw the Knight of Pentacles, and you're like, wow, that really looks like my brother. Just a shot in the dark, maybe this represents your brother. As opposed to going for the more abstract approach to the card, which would be something along the lines of, oh, this represents someone who is um, hardworking and dedicated and really like perseveres in everything that they do. Like that's a wonderful interpretation, and there are times where that sort of interpretation is the best suited to a reading. But there are also times where you can just be really like straightforward and dumb about it. And if you draw a card and you're like, this reminds me of my brother, you don't need to keep looking deeper. And that's I think the main idea that I'm trying to go for is that sometimes tarot really is what it appears to be on the surface. And you can look deeper, you can sort of pry down and look for further layers of symbolism. But if you're asking a question and you just want an answer, sometimes your surface level reaction to tarot is okay. And you're not sort of doing a disservice to yourself as a reader, you're not failing as a reader if you accept the surface level interpretation rather than sort of something more of a deep dive into like esoteric symbolism. And that's an insecurity that I felt for years and years and years as a young tarot reader, that I felt this pressure to be abstract and deep and symbolic with every reading of every card. And I never just let it be easy for myself for the longest time, right? I never let myself just sort of take a deep breath in and out and just say what the card most obviously seemed to be talking about. And that's one of the reasons, actually, that I've transitioned over so much to using the Toth deck. So for those of you who don't know, this is pretty much the primary deck that I use these days. I will occasionally reach for a Rider-Waite style deck, mostly if I'm doing a reading that I want to sort of share with or show to someone else who is a tarot reader who doesn't like Toth symbolism. But when I'm just reading for myself, it's almost exclusively the Toth deck. And the primary reason for that is that it's just really easy to read. It's really, really simple and straightforward. Um, in part because, and I've talked about this before on my blog, and I think even in YouTube videos, the minor arcana have titles on them, and sometimes the title just is the answer to your question. So if you say, like, oh, I've pre-selected this card, so this isn't a reading, but like, oh, I just got in a big fight with my, mother, like, how's this going to turn out? And you draw the Two of Swords. Is it going to focus for me? The title of the Two of Swords in this deck is Peace. Like, you don't need to look any further. Your answer is peace, right? If you say, like, how am I going to do on that big test I have coming up, and you draw the Six of Discs, the title of the Six of Discs, gosh, the glare is just terrible, isn't it? Is success, right? You don't need to look any further. And that's, I guess, sort of the extent of the thing that I want to say in this video is, I don't know, I think that we as readers sometimes pressure ourselves to be profound with every reading and to look for deep esoteric symbolism. And I think we can forget sometimes that divination in general, and then tarot in particular, is a practical tool that sometimes is meant to give us straightforward answers to simple questions. And if you're looking for straightforward answers to simple questions, then it's okay to take a straightforward and simple interpretation of the cards that come up, and to be literal about it rather than perpetually seeking sort of the abstract and the metaphorical and the sort of deep meaning of the card. It's okay for a coin to be a coin, and for the Ten of Coins to say, like, you got some money coming your way. So anyways, that's all I have to say. So I think I'm gonna wrap this video up. But I hope everyone is doing well. 1 year into quarantine, isn't that just great? So great. All right, I will see you next time. Bye.